There's a secluded wilderness hidden deep within the sprawling, untamed forests of northern Maine. A place so remote that even the most determined hikers struggle to find its elusive trails. Here the ancient pines stand sentinel over profound, quiet, broken only by the rustle of unseen wildlife and the distant cry of a loon. At its heart lies Lake Acheron, a body of water famed in hushed local legends for its impossible stillness and almost supernatural clarity. Anglers and hunters from generations past whispered of its profound, unnerving beauty, a glass-like surface that promised serene perfection. But those whispers quickly turned to dread. For Lake Acheron harbored a chilling secret, one that defied all laws of physics and perception. Its surface, despite its flawless transparency and crystalline calm, showed no reflections. No trees, no sky, no clouds, no faces gazing upon its depths. Just the unbroken dark mirror of the water itself. And those who lingered too long by its shores, captivated by its impossible void, eventually vanished without a trace, leaving behind only discarded camping gear or abandoned vehicles. Local law enforcement, baffled, attributed it to the treacherous wilderness. But the few terrified guides who spoke of the lake described a profound sense of loss in the air, a subtle cold despair that seemed to emanate from the water, and a terrifying sensation of being watched by an unseen eye that devoured all light. Lake Acheron became a blank spot on the map of human understanding, its existence relegated to chilling local legends and the desperate, unanswered missing persons reports. This story begins with Alara Thorne, a 34-year-old portrait artist from New York City, renowned globally for her hyper-realistic, almost haunting reflections. Her work, often incorporating mirrors or water surfaces, delved into the complex interplay of identity and self-perception, capturing the subtle nuances of her subjects' inner lives. Alara wasn't a thrill-seeker or a believer in supernatural phenomena. She was a meticulous artist, utterly consumed by the pursuit of visual truth, and the subtle ways light and shadow could reveal the soul. Lake Acheron, with its impossible, unreflective surface, represented the ultimate artistic and perceptual enigma. For her, she'd stumbled upon obscure fragmented articles from discredited scientific journals of the early 20th century, hinting at bizarre light anomalies and peculiar energy signatures detected around the lake, readings that defied optical physics. She'd also found chilling, unverified anecdotes from old Maine folklore about the lake being a face-eater or a mirror to nothing, slowly consuming the image of those who dared to look too long. Alara believed Lake Acheron's true horror lay not in what it hid, but in what it took and what it truly wasn't. She never intended for her pursuit of an image to cost her own. She certainly never intended for the lake itself to forget her name, but fragments of her journey, her terrifying descent into the unmerring depths of perception, survived, captured on her specialized high-resolution camera's corrupted memory cards, meticulously transcribed from her voice-activated audio journal, and ultimately retrieved from a meticulously encrypted, water-damaged portable hard drive found weeks later, snagged in the roots of a half-submerged willow tree miles from her mysteriously abandoned vehicle. The first definitive sign that something was irrevocably wrong didn't come from a spectral presence or a sudden chill in the crisp forest air. It came from the light itself, or rather its utter defiance of expectation. Alara had navigated the treacherous overgrown trails and the dense mist-shrouded valleys for days, guided by her advanced GPS mapping and the increasingly erratic readings from her optical light sensors. She finally located Lake Acheron, a vast circular expanse of water nestled between towering pines, its surface utterly unnaturally still. The air hung cold and damp thick with the scent of pine and wet earth. Her initial atmospheric readings were normal, but as she neared the lake, her highly sensitive ambient light meters registered a gradual, then rapid drop in reflected light spectrum. No shimmer, no glare, no dancing sunbeams. Just an unnatural, profound absence of reflection. She spoke into her field recorder, her voice low, professionally detached, though a subtle undertone of profound curiosity, tinged with nascent unease, was already present. October 10th, 10:15 a.m. Location Lake Acheron, Maine. Ambient light reflection readings dropping precipitously. Registers below typical environmental background for a clear water body. Approaches zero reflection within 50 meters of the shore. This is anomalous. Extreme light absorption. Consistent with folklore. It's like looking into a void, yet it's perfectly clear. She paused, listening intently to the unsettling quiet that pressed in on her eardrums. It wasn't just quiet. It was an emptiness of visual feedback, an unnerving void that seemed to actively consume all returned light. She moved deeper towards the shore, her reinforced boots crunching unnaturally. Loud on the damp earth, the sound immediately swallowed by the oppressive stillness. She reached the water's edge, a bank of smooth gray pebbles. She knelt, extending a hand to the surface. It was cold, unnaturally so, but perfectly transparent. She could see the dark pebbled bottom, clearly visible through meters of water. Yet, when she angled her face or held up a tree branch, there was no mirror image. Just the undisturbed, dark depths beyond. It was profoundly disorienting, a visual paradox. Hours passed under the oppressive sunless sky, perpetually veiled by the dense, low-hanging mist. The silence grew heavier, more pervasive, now accompanied by a subtle, almost inaudible pressure building behind her eyes. She tried to dismiss it as a psychological effect of extreme visual deprivation and constant paradox. But the sensation persisted, a dull ache that resonated deep within her skull, mirroring the unsettling absence. Her biometric suit registered erratic neural activity, localized spikes in her visual cortex, often associated with processing complex visual input, even though there was nothing to process in the reflection. Her portable spectral analysis cameras, after hours of sweeping the vast, unreflective surface, finally locked onto a major, undeniable anomaly. Not just zero reflection, but a series of perfectly distinct, yet utterly alien energy signatures emanating from deep beneath the lake's surface. These signatures were not thermal, not magnetic, but pulsed with a consistent rhythmic pattern. And from their very core, the pressure intensified to a palpable throb, along with a faint luminous pulse captured by the camera's deep spectrum imaging. Not reflected light, but light being generated from within. A deep, impossible obsidian black-like, solidified shadow, yet somehow terrifyingly intrinsically organic. She whispered into her recorder again, her academic detachment fractured by awe and profound dread. The source, it's deep, beneath the center of the lake, emitting a non-thermal luminous pulse. A deep organic obsidian. The non-reflection it's emanating, directly from its core. The pressure, I feel it clearer now. It's like the water is watching. The folklore mentioned the face eater. This is it. This is the source. This is what truly consumes Lake Acheron. A cold metallic taste filled her mouth. The taste of burgeoning terror. Driven by a dangerous, irresistible combination of artistic imperative, fueled by the sheer impossibility of her discovery, and a burgeoning icy fear that chilled her to the core, Elara located the precise epicenter of the pulsing obsidian anomaly. It was directly out in the center of the vast lake, spot marked by an unnaturally smooth, undisturbed patch of water, utterly devoid of ripples or currents, even when a faint breeze stirred the surrounding trees. The air here was utterly still heavy, with a profound earthy scent, now tinged with a faint cloying sweetness, like stagnant water mixed with something vaguely electrical. The obsidian light pulsed from beneath the surface, a vast subterranean heart. Its rhythm a slow, deliberate beat that seemed to synchronize with her own. She noticed peculiar, intricate patterns within the water itself, not just natural currents but swirling inclusions that resembled trapped light or perhaps frozen fragments of visual information. She deployed a small remotely operated submersible, its powerful lights cutting solitary beams through the murky depths. As it descended, the obsidian light from below intensified, pulsing up through the water column, growing brighter, more insistent. The oppressive silence grew deeper, so profound it caused a painful pressure in her ears. But then other sensations began to intrude, not from outside, but from within her own mind. Faint, fragmented memories, half-formed thoughts, almost whispers of forgotten faces, rising and falling with the obsidian pulse. It was profoundly disconcerting, like her own visual memory was being played back to her, distorted and amplified, woven with other alien impressions. The submersible reached the center of the anomaly, where the obsidian glow was brightest. Here, amidst the dark depths, something impossible was located. It wasn't bedrock. It was a vast organic mass, pulsating softly, half buried beneath. The lake bed, its surface slick and vaguely membranous, radiating the obsidian light. It was massive, stretching out of sight into the unseen depths. It had the distinct rhythm of the thump, thump, thump she had felt. This was the source of the lake's endless pulse, a colossal organic well of anti-reflection. And then, just beside the pulsating mass, something horrifying came into focus on the submersible's camera feed. Not natural rock, but a humanoid figure, partially submerged within the glowing, shifting organic mass, as if caught mid-absorption. Its face, agonizingly clear, despite the faint obsidian glow, was contorted in a silent scream, its hands, outstretched fingers splayed. It was a man, likely one of the lost hikers or locals from the missing persons reports. His features were distinct, his expression raw terror. He was not merely a corpse. He was perfectly, horrifyingly preserved, his essence suspended within the living tissue, a testament to an unspeakable fate. Elara stared at the screen, horrified. This was beyond anything she had conceived. Not geological, not even biological in any earthly sense. It was a living canvas. She activated her bioscanner, pointing it at the image on the screen. The readings were impossible. Not inert, not dead. There was persistent bioelectrical activity. Faint, erratic, but undeniably present. The mass wasn't just preserving. It was sustaining. Against all logical judgment, compelled by a desperate need to understand Elara, on her airboat reached out a gloved hand and gently placed it on the unnaturally still obsidian-like surface of the lake, directly above the anomaly. The moment her glove made contact, a searing jolt, not physical, but purely mental, shot through her. Her vision blurred, filled with a blinding flash of obsidian light. and then she was plunged into a torrent of raw, unfiltered sensation. Not words, but a rapid-fire sequence of images and emotions. The sudden crushing cold of the water, the overwhelming sensation of being unseen, the agonizing realization that her image, her very self, was being devoured, absorbed by the water around her, and then a single agonizing, voiceless scream echoing in an absolute suffocating void of forgotten faces. The vision lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Elara recoiled, tearing her hand away from the water, gasping for breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. The internal thump, thump, thump in her head intensified, now accompanied by fainter, more ethereal shimmers from within her own mind, like broken glass. This was not a passive lake. This was a living canvas, and it held conscious agony. The mental jolt from touching the unmirroring water reverberated through Elara, leaving her gasping, disoriented, her mind reeling from the torrent of borrowed terror. She stumbled backward, her suit's internal systems screaming warnings about neurological overload. The chilling images of the man's final moments, the crushing cold, the horror of visual annihilation, the voiceless scream were burned into her retinas, echoing in her thoughts. The profound silence of Lake Akron seemed to press in harder. Now no longer just a lack of sound, but a conscious, palpable presence. The subtle thump-thump from beneath the lake intensified, transforming into a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through the hull of her airboat, through her very bones. It felt like a colossal living drum, beating out a vast, patient, predatory rhythm of oblivion. She spoke into her recorder, her voice hoarse, strained. October 10th, 1:55 p.m. Direct contact made with lake surface above anomaly. Experienced immediate, intense psychological feedback. Shared subjective experience of existential negation. The entity it captures identity. It preserves the absence of self. The water is not inert. It's a living canvas painting over existence. My brainwave patterns are erratic. My mind, it feels stretched thin. She paused, listening to the new, deeper bass note. The shimmers, it's still there, faint, rhythmic, from within. She forced herself to calm, to analyze. The data streaming from her bioscanner pointed at the unmirroring water was impossible. High concentrations of complex biological polymers interwoven with unknown fluid structures and persistent high-level bioelectrical signatures far beyond typical cellular decay rates. These were not dead organisms. They were suspended alive in some terrifying, agonizing state of non-existence. The entity was a living, sentient biological machine capable of absorbing and retaining the essence of life in its final panicked moments, but only its absence. As she moved carefully along the shore, avoiding direct contact with the most intensely pulsating sections of water, the bass note deepened, becoming a vast resonant symphony that seemed to emanate from every surface. The air itself began to shimmer, subtly distorting her vision. She started seeing fleeting ethereal images projected directly into her mind's eye, not memories of the man she touched, but other fragmented identities. A child playing by the shore, its face briefly appearing in the water's surface, then twisting, stretching, fading into abstract light. A desperate woman running her hands across the water, her reflection appearing, then instantly replaced by a fleeting glimpse of another woman, unfamiliar, then a man, then nothing. The terrifying realization that the lake wasn't just unreflective, it was overriding reflections drawing from a vast pool of consumed identities. The unmirroring water itself seemed to actively draw her in a seductive, irresistible pull emanating from its obsidian surface. It wasn't a physical suction, but a deep subconscious urge to step into its perfect stillness, to merge, to understand the profound emptiness, the agonizing peace it offered. Her gaze kept returning to the horrifying beauty of the pulsing water, its internal obsidian glow, promising ultimate knowledge, eternal tranquility, and anonymity. She felt a profound sense of weariness, an aching desire to simply float on the surface, to let the hum wash over her, to become part of its vast living memory of vanished selves. Her own will felt strangely weak, the boundaries of herself eroding under the constant mental assault. She activated her specialized optical sensor, aiming it at the surface of the lake. The readings were bizarre. The water itself was generating a subtle internal light anomaly, actively bending and absorbing light, creating a localized event horizon for reflections. This anomaly wasn't a byproduct of physics. It was consistent, regulated, almost like the internal process of a vast biological system. This was a living organism, a colossal predatory entity, slowly consuming the very concept of visual identity. And then she saw it. Streaks of deeper, more vibrant obsidian within the water, forming intricate pulsing patterns that shifted and flowed like vast, unseen neurological pathways. This water was the entity's skin, its body, its mind. She realized, with a horrifying clarity, that the legends were wrong. The lake wasn't just unmurring. It was consuming mirrors, and everything within it. The terrifying realization solidified in Ilara's mind. The unmurring lake was not merely an optical anomaly, but a vast predatory entity, slowly consuming and assimilating the very concept of identity and reflection, transforming living perception into its own monstrous conscious form. The constant low bass note vibrated through the air, growing more insistent, drawing her closer to the water's edge. The mental echoes were no longer random fragments. They became more focused, more personal. Whispers not of the victims, but seemingly directed at her. You seek truth. We provide. Be absorbed. Be forgotten. The words were formless, yet undeniably present in her thoughts, a seductive, invasive presence. She stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to find evidence to prove this impossible horror. She saw it then, an active absorption site. A cluster of vibrant green lily pads near the shore, unnaturally still their surfaces at the very edge of the pulsating water, already showing a faint obsidian sheen. As she watched, horrified, a thin, almost invisible film of transparent obsidian black tissue seemed to spread across, their surfaces slowly, meticulously coating them, integrating them into the organic whole. It was happening in real time. The process was slow, agonizingly so, but inexorable. The vivid green slowly dulled, becoming part of the living, pulsating organism. Further out, closer to the deepest part of the lake, she saw something even more disturbing. A large wild deer half-submerged. Its powerful hind legs still free, but its front legs, torso, and head already solidified into translucent obsidian flesh. Its eyes, wide with unspeakable agony, reflected the terrifying beauty of the lake's glow. The bass note resonated from it, and Ilara felt a surge of raw, animalistic terror, a desperate, futile struggle erupting in her mind as she inadvertently brushed her gloved hand against a low-hanging branch that dipped into the water. The deer was not dead. It was trapped alive in its silent flesh tomb of oblivion, experiencing eternal agony. It's ongoing. She gasped into her recorder, her voice a raw whisper. The assimilation, it's not a past event. It's happening now. It's absorbing living organisms, and they're aware. They're conscious within the flesh. She could feel a faint, almost imperceptible cold radiating from the very air around her. A subtle decrease in the ambient temperature that her suit registered consistent with a vast biological process consuming energy. The sweet, cloying scent was stronger, almost suffocating. As she watched the horrifying transformation of the lily pads, a fine, almost invisible vapor began to rise from the surface of the unmurring water, shimmering with faint obsidian motes. It was not mist, it was a diffusion of the entity's essence. A fine, almost gaseous form of the living tissue itself. It swirled around her suit, clinging to the visor, making her vision subtly blurry. She felt an unsettling tingling sensation on her exposed skin, around the cuffs of her gloves, and the unprotected areas of her neck. It was a subtle stickiness, a faint tackiness, like dried, invisible residue. She tried to wipe it away, but it seemed to cling stubbornly. Then, from the largest section of the lake, the water itself seemed to undulate. A wave rippled outwards from its colossal bulk, not of water, but of pulsating obsidian flesh, smoothly extending, seeking. And then from the surface of the lake, several translucent, flexible tendrils, gleaming with internal obsidian light, slowly emerged. They were too perfectly formed to be natural water currents or plant roots. They were too purposeful in their movement. They moved slowly, sinuously, like probing fingers extending towards the still living plants, towards the absorbing lily pads, and terrifyingly towards her. The entity was not just consuming passively, it was reaching. The mental intrusions intensified, now accompanied by fragmented, distorted voices not from the air, but from within her mind. Terrified, pleading whispers joining the entity's pervasive bass note. Forget yourself, be empty. She felt her own legs heavy, her movements sluggish, as if the very essence of the entity was beginning to seep into her joints, slowing her reactions. The terrifying realization solidified the entity wasn't just physical. It was a vast conscious canvas of oblivion, a trap laid for centuries, and she had stumbled into its very heart. The translucent obsidian tendrils, gleaming with internal light, extended from the vast organic mass of the unmurring lake, inching across the damp ground towards Elara. Their movement was slow, deliberate, utterly silent, yet filled with an insidious, unyielding purpose. The mental intrusions roared in her mind, a chorus of fragmented pleas, and then the entity's vast, unfeeling command. Forget, dissolve, be absorbed. She could feel a subtle, unsettling cold radiating from the tendrils, a cold that promised not comfort, but absorption. Her own will felt fragile, battered by the constant psychic assault. She stumbled backward, desperately trying to evade the slow, methodical reach of the tendrils. Her suit's internal systems screamed warnings about high-frequency energy absorption. The air around her was now thick, with the fine, shimmering obsidian vapor clinging to her, suit her skin permeating her every breath. The sweet, cloying scent was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. She risked a glance down at her gloved hand. A faint, almost imperceptible absence of reflection was beginning to form on the surface of her glove. A subtle matte film that looked disturbingly similar to the initial stages of assimilation she had observed on the old timber. She frantically tried to rub it off, but it clung, subtly hardening. It was already spreading. The entity was not just reaching for her, it was actively consuming her molecule by molecule, her very skin, becoming the preliminary layer of its terrible identity, devouring flesh. "It's on me," she gasped into her recorder, her voice raw with the terror. That transcended scientific curiosity. The obsidian vapor, it's infesting. I'm turning. It's starting to encapsulate me. I can feel it, a fading of self on my skin. She tried to pull at the glove, but it felt strangely stiff, resistant. The massive organic mass of the unmurring lake, from which the tendrils emanated, began to pulse with a renewed, brighter obsidian light. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump intensified, rising in pitch, becoming a low, echoing hum, like a vast, empty chamber filling her head. The mental intrusions were no longer whispers, but loud, horrifying echoes of agonizing screams, thousands of trapped minds crying out in an unspeakable chorus of terror and eternal consciousness. This was the raw, unfiltered song of Lake Acheron, composed of the final moments of all it had consumed, eternally cycling in oblivion. Elara knew she couldn't fight it physically. The tendrils were slowly, but surely gaining on her, their fleshy tips almost touching her boots. The realization that she was facing a vast, sentient, predatory consciousness, one that consumed life and processed identity, hammered into her mind with brutal clarity. She was just another lost reflection for its endless void, another canvas consumed by its terrifying living darkness. Her eyes darted around the desolate shore, desperate. Her gaze fell upon her autonomous drone, lying discarded near the edge of the lake, having crashed earlier due to the intense energy interference. Its outer shell was already partially coated in the thin obsidian film of vapor, but its internal recording systems, designed to be hardened against extreme environments, might still be functional. If she could reach it, if she could transfer her final horrifying data, her last observations before she became completely assimilated. It was a desperate, illogical hope. She lunged towards the drone, forcing her stiffening limbs to move. The obsidian tendrils, sensing her movement, accelerated their fleshy tips, striking the ground just inches behind her feet. The echoing hum of the lake intensified to a piercing whine, causing agonizing pain in her skull. The mental screams of the trapped souls became a deafening chorus, drowning out her own thoughts, pulling her towards the edge of madness. She reached the drone, her stiff fingers fumbling with the data port. The obsidian film on her gloved hand was visibly thicker now, her movements becoming slow, deliberate, almost petrified. She slammed her suit's data cable into the drone's port, initiating an emergency upload. The drone's small indicator light flickered, green then blue, then, with a final desperate surge, glowing a steady obsidian, mirroring the light that consumed the lake. Data was transferring, her knowledge, her warnings. But the tendrils were upon her. They wrapped around her legs, her arms subtle at first, then firm, pulling her gently, inexorably towards the vast organic mass of the unmurring lake. She could feel the obsidian film spreading rapidly across her entire suit, over her faceplate, slowly obscuring her vision, turning the world into a single blinding obsidian haze. The pervasive echoing hum became a part of her, vibrating through every cell. The mental screams of the trapped souls were no longer external. They were her screams merging with the chorus. Her final thought, as the obsidian flesh fully encased her faceplate, her eyes wide and staring, her body frozen mid-struggle, was not a fear, but a horrifying, agonizing clarity. She was Lake Acheron now, and she remembered everything. And she was unmurring. The autonomous drone, now fully encased in transparent obsidian flesh. Its internal lights, still faintly glowing obsidian, transmitted its final data burst before its signal died forever. It contained Elara Thorne's last log entries, fragmented biometric data, and horrifyingly, a final unidentifiable audio loop. A deep rhythmic thump, 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 punctuated by faint, constant shimmers of unseen broken reflections. And then a single agonizing voiceless scream, echoing in an absolute suffocating identity. Devouring void,